What's going on, summoners? Welcome back to another Pro Guides video. I'm Kangas, and in this video, I'll run you through our updated high ELO tier list for patch 11.10. If you aren't familiar with this series, we go over champion changes and talk about our tier lists curated by our challenger coaches for players at the top of the ladder. This will of course differ a bit from the ones that we provide in our initial patch rundown, as we only take into consideration data from high ELO players. So hit that sub button, and let's get right into it. Let's start off as usual with the top lane. Surprisingly, we actually saw a few important changes hit the live servers this patch. Our first balance change was to Darius. Players across all ranks have wanted to see Darius nerfed, and he's finally been addressed this patch. His E cooldown has been increased from 24 to 12 seconds to the new 26 to 18 seconds. This greatly weakens Darius's late game, as a 6-second longer cooldown means that he'll almost certainly only be able to pull once in a teamfight. Kiting him will not only be easier, but much more rewarding than before. With his pull on cooldown, you're now free to make use of any range advantage that you have. Although his laning hasn't been affected as significantly, this is still a nice nerf that'll make Darius a lot less oppressive even when ahead. Considering how much of an impact this will likely have on him, we've decided to finally drop Darius down a tier into the S tier. And our next change I know a couple of you in the comments will be excited about, Kennen. He hasn't been getting a lot of love this season, and finally it looks like Riot's giving him some support. His W's 4th attack damage has gone up from 10 to 50 plus 20% AP to 20 to 60 plus 25% AP. The 10 flat damage increase will make his laning a lot more potent than before. And unfortunately, you can't dodge a basic attack unless you're playing Jax. This extra damage will stack up over the course of the laning phase, and Kennen should have a much easier time poking enemies down as a result. The increased AP ratio is nice, but overall he won't gain much strength outside of the laning phase from this change. So we'll still leave him in the B tier even after this buff. Kayle also got buffed this patch. Her level 11 of flame damage has gone up from 20% AP to 25% AP, and her level 16 transcendence range has gone up from 50 to 100. The level 16 buff is huge. Extra attack range is a game-deciding factor, and players who manage to take games that late should be able to reap the benefits fully. Although we'll leave her in the B tier for now, there's a good chance that she pushes into the A tier soon. Now, while there weren't any balance changes to jungle champions, we did see a ton of systematic changes hit the jungle this patch. Inevitably, every jungler is going to be hit by the increased spawn timers and shift of power towards Summoner Smite. We'll continue monitoring the state of the game and also have more information in our upcoming mid-patch update. So this is a great time to also ask our question of the day. What champion or champions do you want to see played more this season? I'm personally really excited for Tahm Kench's mini rework. He's really annoying to play as or against right now, but once they change his Devour and ult, I actually think he's gonna be really fun. But let me know your answer in the comments down below, and let's get into the jungle changes. So we made some preemptive shifts to the list this time around. First up, Lee Sin and Shaco have swapped places. Lee Sin continues to top the popularity charts, and for good reason. He's a solid pick, especially in the hands of a skilled player. He's mobile, meaning that he's a very safe pick, and his playmaking potential is insane as a result of his potent ganks at all stages of the game. When ahead, he is a terrifying assassin, and regardless of what build he runs, the threat of an insect combo makes it impossible to ignore him at any point of the game. Xin Zhao has also been moved up to the S tier. He's doing extremely well, and he's been undervalued. A ton of different jungle champions have been nerfed over the past few patches, and slowly but surely, Xin Zhao has finally found his moment to rise. His greatest strength is his straightforward and powerful ganks. Turbo Chem Tank has been nerfed several times, and the jungle meta has been seeing massive shifts, making it much more plausible to play Xin once again. In our OP tier for the jungle, we feature Elise, Morgana, and Lee Sin. Following them in the S tier are Graves, Nunu, Evelynn, Kayn, Taliyah, Fiddlesticks, Rek'Sai, Viego, Nidalee, Kha'Zix, Shaco, Karthus, Diana, and Xin Zhao. Next up, let's run through the mid lane. So let's start off by talking about the giant stone gargoyle in the room. Galio's cooldown has gone up from 18 to 16 to 18 seconds flat. His W's magic damage shield was also decreased from 8 to 20% max health to 8 to 15% max health. What led to Galio's nerfs was his impressive win rate for the past few patches. Regardless of what people think about him, he was a solid pick, with nearly a 52% win rate or higher for practically the entire season. He deals enough damage to be relevant, but his greatest strength comes from his wave clear and utility. Galio's kit is packed with a ton of crowd control, and his ultimate is great for a variety of reasons. You can just use it in too many ways, comboing with your teammates or rescuing your teammates from early game dives. The pick itself has a ton of power, and Riot has finally decided to take some away from the Titan. In spite of this nerf though, we'll still leave Galio in the S tier for high elo. It hurts his tankiness and late game utility, but his damage output remains relatively untouched. So despite these nerfs, Galio is a champion that still has a ton of impact due to his powerful ult. But if you're trying to master using global ultimates and impacting other lanes, you should probably book a session with one of our coaches at ProGuides.com. Sometimes it's just not worth it to leave lane with a global ultimate if you're going to lose too much XP or gold from a wave, but it's also hard to know what the correct decision is. So talking with a high elo coach will really help clear those decisions up for you and just make you overall a better player. Also, we got a promo going on right now, so if you use Rank Up 2021 at checkout, you'll get 20% off the subscription. Check it out if you haven't already. Next up on our mid list is Talon. And Talon nerfs are probably a lot less surprising. Naturally, assassins thrive in solo queue as they snowball hard and typically have a lot of pressure in lane. His Q's bonus attack damage ratio has been reduced from 110% to a flat 100%. Hopefully this nerf leads to less solo kills happening, but we'll still have to wait and see. For a few months now, Talon's win rate has been hovering between 51 and 53%, and just last patch it reached the higher end of that range. The presence of AD assassins limits the viability of a ton of mid lane picks, and with nerfs to Talon, as well as Katarina, who we'll talk about next, we can hope to see some meta shifts in the near future. But keep in mind this is still a relatively small nerf, so we'll still keep him in the OP tier for now. Katarina, on the other hand, received a much bigger nerf. Her movement speed was reduced from 340 to 335. While her damage remains untouched, mobility is absolutely essential, especially when you're playing a melee champion. Getting in range of your targets is crucial, and getting there a moment later can decide between death and potential outplay. After this change, she's now slower than about 63 champions in the game. What this effectively does is that it hurts Katarina both on the offense and also on the run. It's harder for her to chase enemies down, and whenever she does overextend, it's a lot easier to finish her off. And this is especially true in the river, where you can get caught out alone and have no direct exit from a lethal encounter. Ultimately, Katarina will remain a very powerful pick, but we're gonna move her down into the S tier. But it is still very close, and feel free to consider her an OP pick yourself. We just decided to make room for a new champion this cycle. And that champion would happen to be Qiyana. Like we've said, it's the presence of high kill pressure assassins that really dictate the current meta. Qiyana is doing incredibly well in high elo as her kit allows for a ton of skill expression and also unfortunately contributes to a lot of player frustration as well. What makes her really powerful in solo queue is her ability to stealth with her Q's brush element. It leaves very little room for enemies to fight back, and Qiyana's also blessed with some incredible AD ratios that reward early game leads. Her win rates are at or above 53% in lots of servers at elite levels of play. In Korea, her ban rates actually ended above 40% last patch in Diamond 2 and higher. We also made a couple of other changes to the list as well. Pantheon is once again finding a ton of success in the mid lane, so we moved him back to the S tier. Part of this is because he's a great answer to all the assassins present in the mid lane. His E is a pretty hard counter to most of their kits, and he's also able to turn the tables on most of them. Also, Lucian has been moved into the B tier. He's struggling a bit as a pick with the development of the meta, as there's enough damage present that Lucian isn't really a safe blind pick as before. So with that covered, our OP picks in the mid lane are Talon, Zed, and Qiyana, followed up by Katarina, Fizz, Annie, Anivia, Galio, Viego, Yasuo, Echo, LeBlanc, Yone, Silas, Vladimir, Diana, Kassadin, and Pantheon in the S tier. Next up, let's run through the bot laners. Not too much action in the bot lane, but we do have a Jinx nerf to talk about. She's been a top tier pick for several patches now, and Riot was hoping that the bug fix last patch would solve the problem. It didn't, and here we are. Her base armor was reduced from 28 to 26, and her R's execute damage against epic monsters is now capped at 800. Ultimately, the loss of some armor is gonna hurt, especially when she lanes with a sustain-based support. It'll be easier to pressure solo kills and even poke Jinx out of lane as a result of this change. Also factor in that Jinx has one of the highest base starting healths in the game, clocking in at 610. This means that the loss of 2 armor is basically 14 effective health lost from the get-go after you purchase your starting item. This number does rise when you consider health potions, healing, base regeneration, and lifesteal though. That's a lot of me talking up this nerf, but I'm basically trying to convey that 2 armor loss on Jinx is a little more significant than it is on other champions. Nevertheless, she will still remain in her OP tier at the end of the day. So our OP pick for the bot lane is Jinx, followed up by Kai'Sa, Vayne, Tristana, Jhin, Seraphine, Swain, Sivir, Samira, and Ashe in the S tier. Next, we'll wrap it all up with supports. First up, we have Thresh, who's been top tier and desperately in need of nerfs for too long. His base health was lowered from 561 to 530, while his HP per level went up from 93 to 95. I can already hear the player base groaning over this one. He'll be a bit squishier, and you'll have a better chance of taking an early fight against him as a result, but his incredible utility still makes him a really solid pick. It's not a bad nerf, and you can definitely pick champions with stronger level 2s to try and beat him now, but he's definitely still OP. Bard is next, and my god, why'd they have to do it to him? My boy got nerfed. The base damage on his passive was decreased from 40 to 30. This nerf really reduced the amount of poke the Bard can put out during the laning phase. Less poke means that enemies can stay in lane longer, or that they'll just remain healthy enough to try and pick a fight with him. Damage alone isn't what makes Bard a solid pick though. He does provide some wonderful utility with all of his abilities, and this is especially true in high elo where players have a stronger understanding of actually how to play him. So we'll still keep him in the S tier, but I'm still sad. Next up is Lux, who actually got a nice buff for her E. Oh, and keep in mind, this buff also makes her a better mid laner. Her E's damage was just straight up increased from 60 to 240 plus 60% AP to 60 to 260 plus 65% AP. A 20 damage increase on her E is huge. The skill is so powerful. It provides solid damage, crowd control, and also zones enemies off hard. And yep, it deals even more damage this patch. Regardless of whether Lux builds full AP or just more utility, it's a nice buff that should absolutely help her out. And the damage really adds up in high elo, so we decided to move her up to the B tier. Next up, we got a buff for Zyra. This buff feels like it is targeted for high elo specifically, as she's been doing fine in mid and low elo. Her passive Vine Lasher's slow was increased from 25% to 30%. Also, her W's cooldown was lowered from 20 to 12 seconds to 18 to 10 seconds. This decreased cooldown means that Zyra can trade more often than before, and in addition, she'll almost always have a plant ready for use in the late game. With this change, Zyra has been moved up a tier. And finally, Yuumi got buffed. Her Q's base damage went up from 40 to 190 to 50 to 200, while her Q's base and power damage is up from 45 to 245 to 60 to 260. Unfortunately for Yuumi players and their marksman lane partners, they got big scary supports like Thresh, Blitzcrank, and Leona still running rampant in the bot lane, so getting hit by any crowd control is essentially instant death, and with those sort of picks so popular, Yuumi has had very little breathing room. I'm smiling right now, you can't tell. Buffed up now, Yuumi should be able to punish mistakes a little bit harder and have a better chance at scaling up to the late game where she can finally shine, but we're still gonna leave her in the B tier. So our OP picks for support are Thresh and Lulu, followed up by Bard, Morgana, Janna, Alistar, Blitzcrank, Leona, and Senna in the S tier. And that'll wrap up our high elo tier list for patch 11.10. Really hope you all enjoyed it, but let me know your thoughts about it in the comments down below, and also make sure to check out our Discord with a description in the link down below too. We'd love to have you as part of the fam. That's it for today, so as always, best of luck on the Rift, everybody. Stay hydrated, and I'll see you next time.